Hello again, everybody. It's time for the Silver Bullets podcast. I am Michael Citro.
And I'm Chip Minnich.
Chip, it is the week of the big game, the biggest game so far, Ohio State playing Clemson this weekend. And I think the excitement's not quite building for me yet. I'm that nervous tension hasn't quite set in. I've just been enjoying some bowl games and the holiday with the family and things like that. So it hasn't really set in yet, but we got to talk about this, don't we?
Absolutely, we have to talk about this, and I agree with you. I think that kind of that nervous tension, it's not there yet for me, but I can certainly understand where you're coming from.
But the good news is that we have other Ohio State news we can talk about before we get to our Clemson picks to click and predictions and keys to the game and all that stuff coming up in the second part of our show. Let's start us off with the news that freshman wide receiver Mookie Cooper has entered the transfer portal. Probably not a big surprise with the classes of wide receivers that Brian Hartline is bringing in, that not all these guys are going to stick around for the entirety of their career. And Mookie Cooper, one that was struggling to get on the field this year, especially few games, not those preseason cupcake games where you can get into the game and show the coaches what you got. So, maybe he saw the writing on the wall and decided to find another place to play.
Yeah, it's disappointing. I wish him well. Obviously, we have little to go on in terms of the fact that as a true freshman in a crowded room, as you noted, he really didn't. I mean, he didn't get any game action in 2020. He was probably going to see that in 2021. I wish him nothing but the best. I guess, from a standpoint of, I would speculate that if there was a role for him on this team, it was kind of in the in the same kind of mode, maybe as Jameson Williams, but maybe I'm completely mistaken. I'm not sure. I know that he's put his name in the transfer portal, but I couldn't begin to speculate as to where he's going to wind up.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to watch as he, goes through his college career and see what he turns into. You'll never know what he could have been at Ohio State, but it's not the first time a player is transferred from Ohio State, or to Ohio State for that matter. So, it's just part of the game now that you and I didn't have growing up. Transfers were extremely rare, and now it's just like, it's a parachute. It's like, a little escape pod for you if you don't think you're going to get playing time, or you may be stuck in a crowded room with a lot of really talented guys in front of you. Maybe the recruiting process is part of that. You've gone to other schools, you've seen what other programs are like, and maybe you think, it didn't really work out here the way I thought it would, and so maybe it's time to go check something else out. So we'll have to see how it goes. I think another transfer from Ohio State, Trayvon Grimes, I think is just recently announced he's not playing in the bowl game and he's going to go pro. So there was another guy that took off from Ohio State. But now the transfer portal is kind of omnipresent as a part of our lives now in college football.
Precisely. And I certainly don't blame the young men if they, let's face it. I think you made a really good point. When we were growing up, transfers were not as common as they are today. And I certainly, this is not meant to disparage Mookie Cooper, because he was highly touted. He was highly recruited. As I said a moment ago, I couldn't begin to speculate in terms of where he's going to wind up. I'm sure he has NFL aspirations, as do all of the young men who signed with Ohio State, and want to play for Ohio State. The one thing that I guess, to kind of tie into what you said a few moments ago about when we were growing up and transfers weren't as prevalent, is not only we didn't have the transfer portal, but I kind of remember the old adage of, well, what would you do if football was taken away from you? Meaning, like, if your career ended unexpectedly due to injury, beyond reason, anything beyond your control, would you be happy at the school that you have chosen? And it certainly seems as though, and this is not, again, I'm not disparaging Mookie Cooper or any young man who decides to transfer, that is lost. Like the idea of kind of choosing a school beyond for, just using it as a gateway to the NFL. So I wish him nothing but the best. And we'll just kind of see what kind of career he has going forward.
Indeed, and we wish Mookie Cooper good luck wherever he goes, unless he goes up north to that particular school. But other than that, have a good career, Mookie. Of course, there were some AP All-American teams announced since you and I last talked, Chip, and Wyatt Davis and Shaun Wade were named to the first team, and I gotta say, I'm a little bit surprised that Shaun Wade made first team, maybe perhaps by reputation a little bit. But then the other surprising thing is a guy who didn't do as well in the Big Ten voting, Haskell Garrett. He showed up in the AP lists.
Yeah, and congratulations to all of them. I agree with you. I think Shaun Wade certainly made the All-American list this year, the team, I should say, based on reputation more than performance. Congratulations to them nonetheless, because if I'm not mistaken, that means that the Buckeye Grove will be adding 3 new trees to that impressive area. I know that that's something that whenever the spring game takes place, that a lot of people like to kind of go and take a walk around the Buckeye Grove to kind of see where certain players. I know you and I are both fans of Chris Spielman, for example, and being able to see where a certain player's tree is. So it'll be nice to see eventually, if not this year, with the spring game in the future, where those trees are located within the Buckeye Grove.
Indeed, and I believe Haskell Garrett was his second team AP All-American, and I think he was maybe a third team on one team and a honorable mention on the other, if I'm not mistaken, in the Big Ten.
Yes, yeah, I believe. Like in terms of, I'm not sure all of the different rules and regulations as to what enables a player to have a tree planted in the Buckeye Grove. I thought it was to be included on at least one team, but I may be mistaken. It might be multiple teams, but nonetheless, as you said, Shaun Wade, Wyatt Davis for sure being on that, like the first team list, and Haskell Garrett deservedly, I think, should have been rated higher than as you noted. But I'm glad to see he is getting recognition, granted not necessarily first team.
Yeah, I thought maybe it was consensus All-American that got a tree in the Grove.
I think you're right. I think so. Maybe Haskell Garrett will not be getting. I know. Put this way, I know Kirk Barton has been banging the drama, so to speak, on Buckeye Grove. Excuse me, on Buckeye Scoop for a tree for Haskell Garrett, and I agree with Mr. Barton that Haskell Garrett's certainly deserving of one.
I mean, I think he's had a fantastic season, and when I saw the list come out for the Big Ten, the All Big Ten lists, media and coaches lists, I thought some people don't watch the same games I do, because Haskell Garrett has been phenomenal this year, and I don't think you could say there have been more than 2 interior defensive linemen in the Big Ten that have been more disruptive and affected games as much as he has.
You're right. I think Haskell Garrett has been certainly, I don't want to call him a surprise to the Ohio State coaching staff, but he has certainly been on the defensive side of the ball for fans who may not have seen a lot of Haskell Garrett in previous seasons. He certainly has been an underrated element of a very disruptive defensive line that we're going to be talking about the upcoming opponent in Clemson. A good game from Haskell Garrett is certainly going to be on that list necessary for Ohio State to defeat Clemson, and I think he's certainly capable of delivering on that.
Indeed, I think there's no question Wyatt Davis belonged on the first team. Like I said, Shaun Wade, I think, has been maybe not at the level of first team All-American this year, but certainly he has been, good enough maybe last year to make it. But a very crowded, you only get a couple of corners, and it's you can't put everybody in there. But I think he's maybe getting a little bit rewarded for his entire career with his placement on the first team this year. But it's always good this time of year to see the accolades pour in and see how guys are doing. What else we got to talk about, Chip? We have, of course, since you and I have talked, a very interesting week for Dwayne Haskins, who was, let's say didn't make a good decision, and then he didn't play great the next weekend and ended up getting waived by the Washington football team, which is still weird to say. Pick a damn mascot already, Dan Snyder, and let's get on with it. But Dwayne Haskins is an interesting case because he's a supremely talented guy, and certainly one of his hallmarks in college was his accuracy. He hasn't quite been that accurate in the NFL so far, but he has had some good games, and I think a lot of people tend to forget he only started in college for one season. So it's not like he's got a ton of experience. He's still learning the position. He's still learning the game. And maybe, it's always interesting when guys get picked by teams that are near their homes. You always wonder if that's a good fit for the player, because sometimes you just need to be in a strange place. You need to be a stranger in a strange land and just start getting down to the business of being a professional football player and not have, aunts and uncles and cousins and friends and neighbors and everybody kind of presenting distractions for you.
I genuinely feel bad for Dwayne Haskins, but from this very difficult situation that is played out publicly, that I think the opportunity is there for him to the second act, so to speak, the redemption of Dwayne Haskins is fully within his grasp if he takes this opportunity to embrace some necessary changes. I agree with you. I think the fact that he was playing in front of family and friends was a contributing factor. I think it would be unfair of me, without knowing the young man, all of the circumstances surrounding, the decisions he made, that old, I'm sure you're familiar with it. I'm sure our listeners are, those in, glass houses, that kind of mindset. I certainly did not and certainly do not always make good decisions. So for, to pass judgment on what he did or should have done wouldn't be necessarily fair. One of the things that has come to light, or even before his release, was supposedly the decision to draft Dwayne Haskins was far from unanimous. It was the kind of thing where the previous coaching staff supposedly did not want Dwayne Haskins. Dan Snyder did. So he was kind of put into a situation where, all right, you're going to an organization that really didn't necessarily fully embrace you. So I can only hope that with some time and some reflection, he cleared waivers, so he is, any team that wants to sign him can be free to do so without having to worry about having to pick up any kind of the contract that Washington signed, and granted it wasn't exorbitant by any stretch. So I'm optimistic that Dwayne Haskins is going to make some necessary changes, and I'm hoping that the next organization that he is going to be playing for is going to provide better structure for him, and that he's going to learn from some of the mistakes that he made.
Yeah, there'd be some interesting locations he could end up. I guess there's been some rumors about the Steelers, and one can only imagine him, learning from, somebody like Ben Roethlisberger, who's been in the league a long time, wouldn't necessarily be rushed into action. He'd be pretty well off, I think, to go somewhere that's got an established quarterback that's it's maybe got 3 or 4 years left where he could sit back and learn the position and not feel the pressure of being the number one pick. Now he's got a chip on his shoulder. He's got something to prove. Little adversity in his career. It'll be interesting to see how he bounces back from it.
And of course, it would be just so poetic justice of the Pittsburgh Steelers to get a first round talent just handed to them at, let's just say, at minimal expense, right at the end of Ben Roethlisberger's career, to be able to transition to a talented player like Dwayne Haskins. If anything, I would kind of add on to the fact that not only Ben Roethlisberger to kind of help him with learning the position, but taking it in a slightly different way. Let's face it, Ben Roethlisberger wasn't always the poster child of making good decisions off the field himself. And I kind of look at it like, this would also be an opportunity for Dwayne Haskins in that reflective mode that I was describing, like the opportunity for if Ben Roethlisberger were to be able to possibly mentor him about, hey, this is what I used to do too, and here's how it almost wrecked my career, that maybe Dwayne Haskins will take some of those teachings to heart if it does come to pass that he is signed by the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Yeah, I mean, I would my team has a young quarterback, but I would certainly not be upset if they signed Dwayne Haskins and had him battling for potentially taking that spot down the road. And I think he's a talented guy. I think we saw what he could do at Ohio State. And the main thing to me with the transition to the NFL, there's two really main aspects to transitioning from college to the NFL. One is, can you speed up the clock in your head and make the throws that you need to? But the real main thing is, to be an NFL quarterback, you have to be accurate because you have to fit the ball into tighter windows. You're not going to be able to, just have a guy 20 yards behind the defense all the time like you do in college, and you're going to have to throw them open. And when you're accurate, you can do that. So that's something Dwayne Haskins has. That's not a thing that you can really instill in somebody. You either have that or you don't by the time they get to the NFL. So that part is there. Can he speed up the clock in his head and make the right decisions for what he's seeing and what he sees pre-snap and what he sees after the snap? That's those two things. And I think he's got one of them. He just needs to develop the other one. And he needs a mentor to get his head right and to get his confidence back, frankly.
And as you said, I think a change of location. I think that is, I agree with everything you just said. I think a change of venue would do him some good. I think the idea of, and this is not meant to disparage, the fact that, I mean, he was originally, from the Maryland area. The fact that, he had the opportunity to play kind of in front of the family and friends. That support may have also been, I just think the fact that I think maybe a different organization where he's not necessarily, I don't want to say that he's going to be coddled, but that they might put some better structure around him. Let's face it, the Washington football team is not necessarily considered one of the most stable organizations within the NFL. So I think a change of location might do him a lot of good.
Yeah, and let's hope for the best for Simba as he, goes forward in his career. Because it would be a shame if he, if things turned out poorly for him based on just a couple of, poor decisions and not being a good fit at the team that drafted him. That's, I remember a guy named Mike Vrabel who was labeled a bust in Pittsburgh. And then he went to the right situation in New England and had a pretty nice career for himself. Yeah,
and the coach who wanted to select him, didn't have the opportunity because they didn't have necessarily the appropriate draft capital at the time, to select Mike Vrabel. And then when, as you said, he was considered kind of a bust because, let's face it, Mike Vrabel playing that defensive end at Ohio State, he was always considered that kind of that classic tweener between, defensive end and outside linebacker. When the opportunity presented itself to go to the New England Patriots with Bill Belichick, he flourished. He is now, not only he had a successful NFL career complete with Super Bowls, plural, as a player, but now he's a successful head coach in the NFL on his own right.
Right. All right, Chip. One other bit of business that we need to talk about is the rumblings of Urban Meyer. There's whenever there's a coaching vacancy anywhere in the world, Urban Meyer's name is mentioned because legendary coach. Why not? Shoot for the stars, and maybe if you don't get the stars, maybe you get something else in the sky. Who knows? But some NFL teams may be interested in luring Urban Meyer out. Now, whether Urban Meyer has that in the back of his mind, hey, maybe I'd like to try my hand at that. Don't have to recruit, whatnot. I don't know, but what do you make of Urban Meyer to the NFL rumors?
I apologize to you and to our listeners if this comes across as overly negative, but I personally think it would be a mistake for Urban Meyer to go to the NFL because a lot of the same reasons that other national writers like Stuart Mandel of The Athletic have eloquently stated. And that is, I think, for as successful as Urban Meyer has been at the college game, that element of just, let's just say, the fact that, the stress that he felt that caused him to resign from Florida, from Ohio State, I can't see him doing well with the NFL, especially when you have, all right, you're talking about, let's say, it doesn't matter which of the organizations he would go into, but you're not going to just only have one or two losses. I think it's very difficult for somebody like Urban Meyer to turn that aspect or component of his personality off. I think that's just the way he's wired. I think he did not do well. Stuart Mandel pointed out, like, the few times that he lost in college, I mean, like, that he just seemed kind of, I think I'm probably putting words in Stuart Mandel's mouth, but
that's okay. That's okay. I got a few I'd like to put in Stuart Mandel's mouth, and
but I'm just
maybe a foot or two.
I'm just saying, but I think that Stuart Mandel made really good points about there were times where after a loss that he seemed completely shell-shocked, that it just seemed so distraught at what had just taken place. I mean, we all have the image of the look of, just complete, just kind of, like he was like that vacant stare after the 2013 Ohio State loss in the Big Ten championship to Michigan State, sitting on that golf cart eating pizza, those kind of things. I can't see him doing well at the NFL level, especially, and here's the thing that I don't think a lot of people are really talking about, when you really don't have that power of, or control over the roster in the sense like you do at the college level. Like, these are grown men who are making exorbitant amounts of money. So the motivational tactics aren't going to be the same. I just think if it was me, if I was Shelley Meyer, I would really be concerned. All of the debilitating health issues that quite literally brought him to his knees on more than one occasion. I would just point out, look, you've got a really good thing going here with Fox Sports. We've got more than enough money. I understand the competitive nature and the competitive fires that are always going to be there, but I would just say, it's okay to be asked about, but if it was me, I think it would be a mistake for him to go to the NFL.
All right. Yeah, it's, to me, anytime his name comes up for a job, I think of him doubled over, and I think of him, like, if you have, any kind of health issue that stress exacerbates, coaching's not the correct place to be because it's a stressful profession, obviously. And it's easy when you've been away from it for a year or two, when you're feeling better, to go, okay, well, I'm better now, and to think, okay, maybe I'll give this a shot again. I'm feeling pretty good. Got a new plan for managing it. But in the end, your body always wins out. However things stack up. So I think that from that perspective, I don't think he should do it. On the other hand, who am I to tell Urban Meyer what to do if he wants to do something? I mean, it's how many people get a chance to coach an NFL team, and if it's the right fit and it's a team that he wants to go to and he's interested, I mean, give it a shot if you want. I mean, it's your life, and the worst thing that can happen is things don't go well and you're out in a year, and that's it. You gave it a shot, and things could go better. Who knows? I would never bet against Urban Meyer. Put it that way.
Oh, I'm not betting against him. I
Mm-hmm.
certainly, I don't want to. I agree with you. I'm not telling him what to do because, again, I mean, it's his decision. I think you raised a good point that, well, if things don't work out, after a year or two, I just think that again, it will be one of those, just another one of those things where the naysayers, like, oh, like, we knew this was going to happen. I don't know, like, I just think, to me, it would be surprising to me if he goes. The most likely candidate to me I can see out of all the teams is Jacksonville, simply because of the fact that it's out of the fact that they have the number one pick. Trevor Lawrence will probably be the selection. An opportunity for him to. They have, from what I understand, a very heavy laden roster of draft choices coming up in the upcoming draft to help replenish that team. It makes sense out of the organizations. I could see that one, for him to be able to kind of make that big splash. I just think that, when it comes to, as you stated, and I completely agree with you. I mean, the body is going to do what the body's going to respond. How the body's going to respond, and
Mm-hmm.
coaching in the NFL, like you said, is a stressful thing, and I would hate to see his health be compromised because of this decision.
Sure, and I think too, you're right about that. It's there's not very many situations where I think he would go ahead and take it. I think he would, you maybe be tempted by a Cleveland or Cincinnati, so because it's in Ohio, maybe be tempted by one of the Floridian teams because he's got strong ties here, and maybe some kind of name brand team like the Dallas Cowboys or something. But I don't think, other than that, I couldn't see him going and saying, okay, I'll take over for Mike Vrabel at the Tennessee Titans, or something like that. That's not something that I would think he would be interested in. But I guess we'll watch and see how it plays out. I don't expect him to take an NFL job, but the thing is, he's a wonderful college football analyst. He's very good at his job, and it would be a shame to lose him. Selfishly, as a college football fan. I mean, I watch the pros too, but as a college football fan, I'd hate to have him, gone from the pregame show and get his analysis on games, because he's entertaining, he's very knowledgeable, and it's really nice to watch him, because very few people doing analysis on TV bring what he brings to the telecast.
I completely agree with you. I think he's exceptional. I have found his analysis whenever watching Fox to be spot on, and I also, if I'm not mistaken, I believe a decision by Urban Meyer, if the online social media rumors are correct, if there is a decision to be made, it's supposed to be by the end of this week. So, as 2020 turns into 2021, he will let any of the organizations who have supposedly inquired about him, about his interest, as to whether or not he has that. So again, we'll see, but I'm hoping he stays with Fox and continues doing that terrific job.
All right, Chip. Well, anything else we got to cover from Ohio State's side before we start talking about the matchup with Clemson?
No, I think let's get to it. Let's try and get those that nervous energy that for you and me about this game, get that cranked up a little bit.
Let's get it going. All right. So we have the big game against Clemson in the semifinal of the college football playoff coming up. We'll get to that talk right after this. All right. Well, Chip, the Buckeyes are going to play Clemson. It was almost, I almost think this was a preordained thing from, the end of last college football season where the Buckeyes, I thought they outplayed Clemson. I thought there were about 10 plays in that game that if any one of those 10 go differently, Ohio State wins the game, especially, everybody remembers the scoop and score that was inexplicably overturned, and I still, based on what I'm seeing on replay, officials' decisions on TV in these games, I still can't for the life of me figure out why that was overturned. But I think, Chip, a lot of people are not properly contextualizing that loss to Clemson. None of 2020, none of all of the badness that has happened this year happened before that game. That game was the cause of 2020.
Yeah, I think it kind of was a dismal foreshadowing of the difficult year that the entire population has endured. But yeah, I going back to something you said, I think this game, at least for Ohio State fans, the term you used, preordained. This is the opponent that Ohio State players, coaches, and fans have certainly been counting down towards ever since that game concluded against Clemson last year.
I don't know about you, but I didn't hear a single state releasing COVID numbers before Ohio State lost that game.
Yeah, it's highly coincidental, wouldn't you think?
Yeah, so. I think there's something there. It's all tied together. And I blame Dabo Swinney for that. I think it's his fault, and I hope he feels bad about it. But no, seriously, like you said, as soon as that pass from Justin Fields was intercepted, as Chris Olave fell down in the end zone, it's been that moment since Ohio State wanted to get back into this position to play Clemson again, and now they get their wish. But the old proverb is be careful what you wish for, because this Ohio State team, Chip, is not as good as last year's Ohio State team. It certainly isn't clicking as well as last year's Ohio State team, and Clemson doesn't look like it's missed a beat. So I don't know what's going to happen. I'm not trying to be negative or a naysayer here, but you watched the Indiana game, you watched the Northwestern game. Do you see this as a game that Ohio State is likely to win?
I wouldn't say that they're likely to win. That would be overly optimistic. I kind of pride myself on the realistic assessment, as you just said. This Ohio State team is not as good as last year's team. I think the fact that you said that Clemson, it seems like they have, kind of have hardly missed a beat. I agree to a certain extent. I think, there are elements of that Clemson team from last year that were better than this year's. I think probably the best explanation as to why this Ohio State team, one of the best explanations is, we've touched on this before, is that Ohio State, we all know it, Ohio State had a very disjointed season, only played 6 games. So by logic, they're usually, you're talking about a team that, you're in a traditional calendar sense, you're talking the middle of October, going up against a team that is much more battle tested. With Clemson, the fact that they played 11 games, that makes a lot more sense. So Yeah, I'm not saying Ohio State can't win, but there are a lot of things that I kind of have written down in anticipation of our podcast tonight that Ohio State needs to do in order to win.
Yeah. So the Buckeyes are. I mean, when you look at this year's team, like you touched on, they're kind of in mid to late October form. They're not in, heading into the college football playoff form. They didn't get to eat their cupcakes at the beginning of the year and get guys out there and get reps for young guys who could step in when guys go down. They didn't get to, build that confidence from those early, wins against maybe MAC schools or bottom level teams from other Power 5 conferences like they would in a typical year. Get that early test maybe against a good solid team. Like a TCU or somebody like that we've seen them play in non-conference games in recent years. This year it was supposed to be Oregon, and I think will be a factor in this game. I mean, Clemson is in their normal position where they normally are this time of year. They've played some tough games. They've been through a long conference schedule. They've been through the number of games you would normally expect. The fact that they get Travis Etienne back this year was unexpected and huge for them. When you get a generational running back back for another year that you don't expect, that's a huge asset. And meanwhile, Ohio State has a bunch of guys that are starting in the NFL that were on last year's defense, and that defense, I think, when you look at Clemson's offense and as good as it's been over the last several years, that was a pretty decent amount of yards and points that Ohio State gave up, and that came with guys like Chase Young and Damon Arnett and Jordan Fuller and Jeff Okudah on the field, and you had Deshaun Wade, in the slot until the targeting penalty. It's not that same group this year, and we've seen the results that we've seen with a different group out there this year have not been what they were last year, and it's not a knock on the players that are in there now. They're every defensive back goes through this. They go through the time when they're not on the field and just getting spot duty late in games. Then they step into a starter's role, but they've got to learn the position and get good at it, and then they start to dominate their last year or two. It's very abnormal to see a guy come in as a freshman and just be great as a cornerback and starting college cornerback right off the bat, play 3 years and leave. It's insanely rare.
Absolutely. Something that, you alluded to, but just to reiterate this point, Ohio State has not played a full 60-minute game versus a quality opponent this year. I mean, let's face it. If there's been a critique, fair or unfair, of Ohio State this year, is that, when they played, you and I and others, looked at the Penn State game in the second game of the season. That'll probably be the biggest, toughest opponent that Ohio State has this season. And Ohio State won, but they did not. They got out to a great start, but they didn't finish well. We talked about Indiana. They got out to a great start, didn't finish well. Northwestern was a slugfest all throughout. They finished better, but they didn't finish well. And so that's one of those, I know it's cliche to say, but it truly is going to, for Ohio State to win this game, is going to require a full 60-minute effort from start to finish against the best opponent that they've had. Something that you brought up as it relates to the secondary, and I know that, this is easier said than done, because the secondary is not as talented as last year. One of the things that's going to be interesting two of the things that I think that will be interesting to see is if Ohio State, their choice of coverage scheme, if they're going to play the man coverage, or if they're going to try to incorporate more zone to help that secondary. I think that's going to bear noticing. No matter what kind of coverage scheme that they decide to employ against Clemson, what I think is absolutely crucial is Clemson's going to complete passes. That's a given. I mean, I don't know how many, but they're going to complete passes. how effective Ohio State secondary is at limiting yards after the catch is going to be crucial. They can't have the missed tackles. They can't have the blown assignments, any biting on double moves, any of the things that we've seen so far. It's going to be absolutely essential for the secondary to, if a receiver makes a catch, to tackle them and limit what yardage they get after that catch.
I agree with that, and I think there's two main things that they need to do in the passing game, aside from what you just said. One is not to let Travis Etienne have a field day out of the backfield catching the ball, and I don't know how you do that because he's really good, and he's hard to cover. He's hard for anybody to cover, and it's usually going to be a linebacker on him. So is it Pete Werner? Is it Baron Browning? Do you play more of Justin Hilliard, who just had a huge game, and maybe he can do it? I don't know how you do that, but the other part of that they need to do is they need to limit Trevor Lawrence and his scrambling, because we saw it last year. If he gets through to that second level, he could score on any given play. He runs a little bit like Terrell Pryor did in that he doesn't look like he's moving all that fast, but the next thing you know, your angle is wrong and he's by you. So, he's a guy that you've got to put a spy on him, and you've got to make sure you take good angles to the ball. You always have to assume, that he's moving faster than he looks like he's moving. So you take a little bit more of a conservative angle, even if it means we giving up 3 or 4 extra yards, maybe giving up a first down. That's better than him getting by you and making a huge explosion play. So Clemson presents a lot of problems to the Ohio State defense, and the Ohio State defense has shown signs of being good at times. I would point to keeping Northwestern off the board in the second half, being very sound at times in some games, but then in other games, they've put together a very complete first half and then got picked apart in the second half. So we'll have to see if we get a complete game out of Kerry Combs' defense. It's always tricky to play zone defense in college because there's an art to it that is subtle about picking up guys that are in your zone. It's like it's okay to be you need to be in your zone and kind of patrolling it, but then when a guy comes into your zone, you can't just watch him go and catch the ball. You actually have to go and take him while he's in your zone. So it's the good thing is you keep everything in front of you, keep your eyes to the quarterback. Maybe you can make an interception, you can make tackles. You can certainly see when Trevor Lawrence scrambles, but it presents other problems, and Trevor Lawrence is an accurate quarterback. So it's a little bit about it's a little pick your poison when it comes to Clemson. And I think that the most important part of the defensive day when these teams meet is going to be making him uncomfortable in the pocket, and that's on those 4 guys up front.
Yes, and that kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier in the podcast about the play of Haskell Garrett as well as his teammates on that defensive line. I think you raise really good points about ATN as a receiver out of the backfield. I think this is going to be one of these games where Ohio State, they have to just have the strength of conviction in their defensive line that the defensive line is going to be able to clog up the running lanes for ATN to, I'm not, and again, it seems so counterproductive. Like, wait a second, are you actually saying that you want Clemson to throw? No, I'm merely making the point that you have to make it as best as possible, like Clemson earn every yard on the field. And I would rather, if I could, be like a defensive strategy, I would rely on Haskell Garrett, Tommy Togiai, the other defensive linemen to stymie that running game. Like you said, Trevor Lawrence is a deceptively good runner. I think the linebackers, as you said, you made a great point that I was going to, and so I applaud you for making it. You have to spy on Trevor Lawrence. You can't allow Trevor Lawrence to gain those yards unimpeded as he did last year. And that's not meant as a slam on Jeff Hafley, but that was not something that, playing that man scheme, when their backs are turned and the next thing you know, Trevor Lawrence is scampering, for big yards.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I think we're both of the same mindset. I think if I'm Ohio State, I'm going to believe that the Ohio State defensive line can certainly make things difficult on the Clemson running game. And I'm going to also rely on that veteran linebacker group to not only be effective against that running game, but also, limit the design quarterback runs and also limit the effectiveness of ATN as a receiver out of the backfield.
Now, you come into this game, and Clemson is a prolific offense, but only 64th in the country in rushing. Their line play hasn't been quite as good this year, maybe as last year in that respect, that aspect of the game. But, I think Ohio State's been pretty good at stopping the run this year. They're going to have to continue that. And, getting back to your spy thing, I don't think the spy can be somebody who's I think it's got to be somebody athletic. I think it's got to be somebody like a Baron Browning or a Justin Hilliard. I don't think you can get away with Tough Borland being your spy, because I don't know that he's quick and shifty enough to deal with the strength and size and speed combination that Trevor Lawrence has. So we'll see how they attack that this weekend. Getting back to the Clemson offense, the Tigers they have the third best scoring offense in the country this year. They're averaging 44.9 points a game, so I think Ohio State needs to score 45 points to win this game. I think is what I'm, what the statistics bear out. Maybe not quite that much, but we'll see how it goes. Clemson has got the 7th rated passing offense nationally, 343.8 yards per game. That's pretty good. And the total offense, Clemson is 10th overall in the total offense nationally, 507 yards a game. Ohio State, for comparison, 529 in 6th place. So two pretty good offenses on display, and maybe the Buckeyes with a little more to prove offensively after their last performance.
Well, I certainly think Ohio State has a lot more to prove after their last offensive performance against Northwestern. I'm going to say something that, I would believe that you would nod in agreement, because I know this is something that is near and dear to your heart, and it's something that you believe is a fundamental of successful football. And when we talk about the Ohio State offense, and that is they have to stick with that running game. It's not anything that I'm not, I'm sure Coach Hayes somewhere is smiling as I make that statement. But the reality is, I think Clemson, they have defensively, they are going to concentrate on, trying to, shut down Trey Sermon and Justin Fields on design quarterback runs. But I think it is absolutely crucial for Ohio State to stick with the running game, no matter how. I don't want to paint a bleak picture, but how challenging it may seem at the onset, because I think that you have said in the past, these are the kind of things where in the second half, those plays that may not have gained big yards in the first half, they start to gain more yards in the second half. The magic number, in my opinion, the goal is, again, going to be easier said than done, is for Ohio State, if they can get collectively, obviously I would love it if Trey Sermon went off on his own and did this on his own, but collectively, if they can run for over 200 yards against Clemson, they can win this game. And the reason 200 yards to me is the magic number, and I'm not just pulling that out of thin air, is that scrutinizing some of the other Clemson opponents, the only team to defeat Clemson this year was Notre Dame. Now, granted, 2 overtimes, but they ran for over 200 yards against Clemson. It can be done, but you have to be committed to do it.
And Ohio State is rushing for 275 yards per game this year. They are 5th in the country in rushing offense, so that bodes well, and especially since the run game has really come to the forefront the last 2 games. It seems like the the offensive line is gelling with the running backs and with the quarterback, and it looks like everything is sort of coming together at the right time in the run game, where this line is still having some issues is blitzes and some cohesion issues when it comes to, stunts and slants and that kind of thing. Dealing with that kind of thing has been an issue. But Ohio State may be able to run the ball. We'll have to see. Trey Sermon, he ran for his first 100-yard game as a Buckeye, and then he ran for his first 300-yard game as a Buckeye. So, if that trend continues, he'll run for 700 yards this weekend.
I'll take it.
I think they got a good chance to win if Trey Sermon runs for 700 yards.
Sure. Yeah, I would think so. I guess as cliche as this is something that I've always said, regardless of how big the game is or who the opponent is, but especially as I try to look at this as, in terms of like the strategy for me, if I'm Ryan Day, and I realize how cliche this is going to sound, but on 1st and 10, you can't allow 1st and 10 to turn into, to getting behind the sticks. You know what I mean? Like, like the false starts, the penalties, all those kind of things to put you, at 2nd and 15 or, taking sacks. Like 1st and 10 needs to turn into the ideal, to me, the ideal yardage would be a 1st and 10 play turns into 2nd and 4. Because to me, that just opens up your playbook so much more in terms of a run or a pass, keeping that Clemson defense unsettled. And so what I would hope, and I agree with everything you said about the offensive line in terms of like with the stunts and the blitzes and things that maybe would help, is maybe some more designed rollouts, QB waggle plays to allow Justin Fields to, again, kind of going back to that cliche of, okay, even if on 1st and 10 and you're rolling out and nothing is open, but he gets, 2 yards, 3 yards, you see what I'm saying? Like the positive yardage, instead of, because I think we were talking earlier about Dwayne Haskins, like that internal clock. That's one of the critiques, fairly or unfairly, of Justin Fields, is that his internal clock on passing seems like I'm not sure if it's that a lack of confidence in himself or a belief that he has more time. But I think that internal clock, hopefully that they have been instructing him over these past few weeks, on first, and when you drop back to pass, to make your reads, if it's not there, take off, and look for your checkdowns. I think, I'm hoping that hopefully, a player like a Jeremy Ruckert or a Luke Farrell, as a positive outlet, instead of, necessarily having to be Chris Olave or Garrett Wilson, as great as they are, trying to find the tight end as an outlet, or possibly Trey Sermon as a receiver out of the backfield, that those are going to be viable options in the offense as well.
Yeah, I think maybe the last couple of weeks of shunning the tight ends, maybe that was a big rope-a-dope, and they're going to use them heavily in this game. Who knows? We have to hope. But I agree with you that they got to get positive yards. I think Ryan Day, if you told him, we need you to get 6 yards on first down, I think Ryan Day would be ecstatic to have 6 yards on first down. That's maybe a little bit much to ask, but the other thing about first down is you can't become predictable either. You can't say, okay, every single first down they're running Trey Sermon, and unless it's like Northwestern and they never can stop it. So then you could just run them every single play if you want. But I don't anticipate that to happen with Clemson having the number 9 rush defense in the country, allowing 99.82 yards per game rushing. I think they have to mix it up. They still have to be balanced, and maybe that means some of those little, I don't even know what you call them. They're not really quite a jet sweep because technically it's a pass. Maybe it's a pop pass, that thing where the guy runs in front of you and you just flip it to him. Maybe they got to put some of that in there. Maybe they got to put some quarterback draws in on early downs rather than only doing it like on 3rd and 8 when it's kind of obvious that they might run it. But I agree with you. They need to stay, on schedule, and I think Ryan Day is a big proponent of staying on schedule. So we'll see how they accomplish that. They definitely need to be able to try to run the ball, like you said. This is one of my favorite topics because it goes back to Woody Hayes, it goes to Earl Bruce, it goes to John Cooper, it goes to Jim Tressel. Those 2-yard gains in the first quarter become 8-yard gains in the fourth quarter if you stick with it and you're committed to it. You can't just completely go away when things are not going well. And I think Trey Sermon has shown that he's in a rhythm. He's got confidence and he's finding the holes. He's doing a better job of reading the play. His linemen are doing a better job of staying on their blocks and getting guys cleaned up for him and getting to the second level. In fact, and the coaches are doing a little bit better job with their play calling for Trey Sermon too. So I think all of that has come together nicely. It just remains to be seen how the rest of the offense will work when you're talking about Clemson. Now, Clemson has the number 11 chip scoring defense in the country. They only allow 17.5 points per game. That's pretty good. Ohio State is 25th, allowing 21 points per game. It's a little bit high for an Ohio State defense. You'd like to have a top 10 scoring defense, but we can't all be Marshall and Army and Air Force.
No, we can't. And believe me, I'm certainly, I'm not trying to be greedy with my hopes for, to gain 6 yards on first down. My point being that, to avoid, I think you and I and any Ohio State fan has seen, when, regardless of whether it's false starts or penalty, other kind of, penalties that, first and 10 goes to second. And like you said, you're behind the sticks, against a team as talented as Clemson, you're just adding insult to injury, whenever you put your team in those kind of positions. And here's another thing to kind of point out that I think it's such an underrated aspect. You invoked, Coach Hayes' his name, and Coach Tressel's name a moment ago. I think what's absolutely imperative is, the play of the special teams units, regardless of whether we're talking the coverage units, like the old adage about, every possession ending with a kick. Ideally, it's an extra point after a touchdown. But as Coach Tressel, the most important play in football being the punt, the idea of being able to flip the field. Let's face it, it goes back to what I said earlier, that you want to make Clemson have to earn every yard, not give up easy touchdowns. Like you want to, pin them deep, make them have to scratch and claw and fight. Granted, the Ohio State defense isn't as talented as it was a year ago, but I think it's within their capacity to make things difficult for Clemson and potentially get them frustrated.
Yeah, I think what was hidden in all of that you were talking about with every possession ends in a kick is turnovers are going to be a huge factor in the game. If you don't have any, you have a better chance of winning the game. If that last pass that Fields threw last year in the game had fallen incomplete, you get another down. You get another play to try to win the game.
Yep.
Avoid turnovers is huge. A big play in a special teams would be huge. A blocked kick, a blocked punt, a scoop and score on one of those. Those always seem to increase your odds of winning, exponentially. So we'll see if maybe they can come up with something there. Just to finish the thoughts on Clemson's defense, the Tigers are giving up a little under 200 yards a game through the air. They are 26th against the pass. 198.6 yards per game given up. That's that's something Ohio State can work with. Justin Fields can work with that. And Clemson in total defense, 6th in the country at 298.5 yards per game, and that is not bad. It's not bad. They're and it's. I should say that you do have to consider a little bit about their opposition. But then again, Ohio State has not played a great Big Ten schedule this year either.
No, Ohio State hasn't. And for all of the hubbub about Ohio State only playing 6 games, we've talked about this before, but let's just kind of remind everyone that 2 of those 3 games Ohio State wanted to play, but their opponents canceled on them. If Ohio State could have played 9 games, if Ohio State could have played, you talked earlier about like their traditional non-conference opponents, all those kind of things. Ohio State certainly wanted to play more than 6 games. Getting back to Clemson's opponents, this is going to be kind of a shocker, but Ohio State isn't the Citadel. All right, so this is going to be a team that is coming in, and they can thank Clemson fans and players can thank their coach for continuing to stoke the psychological fires of the Ohio State players, because nobody is forcing Dabo Swinney to keep saying why he voted Ohio State 11th. All these things that are you can say what you will about how effective that is, but I think Ryan Day is certainly taking full advantage of all of the psychological props that Dabo Swinney is very willingly giving him. I think the pride has been blistered within that locker room for Ohio State. Those are some talented ball players who they could have very easily. Some of them could have very easily have chosen Clemson. By the same token, a lot of the players on Clemson's roster, vice versa for Ohio State. So let's not mistake the fact that Ohio State, they've got some talent. Granted, they're not as battle experienced due to the fact that they only played 6 games, but I think Ryan Day and that coaching staff, they're going to be well prepared for whatever Clemson brings out on Friday night.
Well, let us definitely hope so. Yeah, this is not Wake Forest that they're playing, or Citadel, like you mentioned, or Virginia, or Georgia Tech. This is a much better opponent. I mean, this is a Clemson team they went through some stuff this year in terms of having some guys out. Ohio State has also had some guys out at times this year, and we'll see how it goes on January 1st. Let's take a little bit of a look inside the roster of the Clemson Tigers. Of course, Trevor Lawrence is the guy everybody knows. He is completing a very nice 69% of his passes this year. 22 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. He's thrown for 2,753 yards. He's played in 9 games, missed a couple, including that first meeting with Notre Dame. Although his backup played pretty well in that game, so I don't think that quarterback was the reason they lost that game. Let's go and take a look at another guy everybody knows, Travis Etienne. He has run for 882 yards this season. He's averaging 5.58 yards per carry, 13 touchdowns. He's obviously a key to the Buckeyes' success, is if they can shut him down or limit him. And I thought they did a pretty good job for chunks of the game last year, but Etienne always seems to pop one here and there. And of course, his play in the passing game is every bit as crucial, if not more crucial. Trevor Lawrence is actually Clemson's second leading rusher with 211 yards and 7 touchdowns. So clearly the RPOs, that's something that Ohio State's going to have to be honest. They're going to have to read their keys. They're going to have to do it quickly, and they're going to have to pick what they want Trevor Lawrence to do with the football. And it will be interesting to see what Ohio State deems as the poison they want to pick in this game.
Very apropos term there. You're going to have to pick the poison. Let's if anything, well, I would rather pick the poison that's going to take the longest amount of time to be delivered. You know what I mean? Like if that means, a lengthy drive that, okay, and Clemson winds up with a field goal, so be it. I think I would rather, instead of quick strikes down the field by Trevor Lawrence to that receiving core, I would rather Ohio State, if they can, make Clemson, any of the passing games, let just kind of force them into, that they are going to complete their passes, but, make them pay for it when they catch that ball, like just kind of, again, hit them right when they catch it. And after a while, that is not a pleasant experience to go over the middle and, getting some bone rattling shots. I'm not saying cheap shots. I'm just saying that's kind of, to make them pay. The secondary, to, like I said, limit the yards after catch, be sure tacklers. And I think that might play a psychological effect on the Clemson receivers.
Right. I'm actually glad you brought up the make them pay thing, because when it comes to run pass option, I almost would think Ohio State wants Trevor Lawrence to keep the ball early in the game and get some shots in on him early, because I seem to remember a quarterback in a Clemson-Ohio State game that was a bit banged up late in that game and wasn't able to really perform at his best, and it helped the other team win the game. And, of course, I'm referring to Braxton Miller, who was basically playing with a bad shoulder by the end of that Clemson game. Was that Orange Bowl, I believe it was?
Yeah, you got it.
And that was an utterly winnable game, but Braxton couldn't throw the ball. He couldn't do much of anything late in that game, and that would just be a shame if Trevor Lawrence was all beat up at the end of the game and couldn't make plays. Getting to the receivers for Clemson, you have to know where Amari Rodgers is, Chip, and that's because he has caught a very nice 69 receptions for 966 yards. He's averaging 14 yards, and he has 7 touchdowns. Also got to know where Cornell Powell is, 743 yards and 5 touchdowns, and averaging 16.5 yards per reception. Those are the guys you got to know where they are at all times. And Travis Etienne, as we talked about, third leading receiver on the team, he's got 524 yards, and he's getting almost 50 yards a game in the air for them at running back. So that's the passing game. And we know all about Clemson's passing game, but slowing it down and making it take a patient approach to the game, it's something that everybody wants to do, but it's very hard to do.
Oh, like I said, easier said than done. I think we talked earlier about Shaun Wade and his All-American status, whether it was deserved or not. Here's an opportunity for him. I'm not sure who he will be matched up on. It would seem logical it would be against Rodgers, but that being the case, I mean, we're going to need more than just Shaun Wade. You're going to need Sevyn Banks to play an extremely good game. You're going to need Marcus Williamson to play an extremely good game. You certainly need the safeties to play better than they have, regardless of whether we're talking Marcus Hooker or Josh Proctor. So the secondary has to come shining through against a team that throws the ball this effectively.
And we kind of don't know who's going to play in the secondary at this point.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, it's entirely, we have no idea in terms of, if, let's face it, like I think Marcus Hooker, if I'm not mistaken, did not play the last game. It had nothing to do with COVID. I mean, I think that was like a game time decision from what I understand. I don't think
he went to the game, so it couldn't have been a COVID issue because he was at the game, actually in Indianapolis.
Right. So let's see, like this might be an opportunity for, again, like for Hooker or Proctor or any of the other backup safeties who have had very little playing time. Let's see if maybe Kerry Combs has kind of a rotation design. I don't know. I mean, the reason I'm kind of stammering over this, we're talking about, are you going to be playing man coverage, zone coverage? I think you made really good points about how difficult either of them, the challenges associated with either of those strategies. So it remains to be seen how effective the Ohio State defensive scheme is against a very impressive Clemson passing attack.
The best scheme is every single play is a Zach Harrison sack.
Yeah, that would be nice. That would certainly be welcomed. Now that we can come back to, because Christmas was last week and we can't get that I don't think Santa's going to be delivering us that. But I think
Well, I'm not greedy. It doesn't have to be Zach Harrison. It could be Jonathan Cooper. It could be
Okay,
Tommy Togiai. It could be Haskell Garrett. It could be one of the linebackers blitzing.
sure, sure.
But I'm pretty sure that if he's laying on the ground with the ball in his hand and the whistle blows, then he can no longer complete a pass at that point on that play.
Very good point.
I think that's
Yeah, you can
how
only
football works.
yeah, I can only hope that whatever kind of pressure that Ohio State can generate is enough to fluster Trevor Lawrence. I keep saying it, but it's easier said than done. That it would be nice to say, oh, like he has a tendency to make mistakes. He doesn't. There's a reason why he's so highly coveted. So anything that they can do to, as you said, I'm not saying cheap shots. I'm not saying anything dirty. I'm saying, but anything if they can rush throws, like if that pressure, from the interior defensive line or from Zach Harrison or from any of the other defensive ends that you mentioned, after a while, that he threw that ball sooner than he wanted to, and the ball, is sailing high or had to throw it out of bounds or whatever, like that's kind of what I would love to see.
Mm-hmm. And smart plays all over the field. I mean, if you find that you can't beat your man on a given play, watch the quarterback. Get your hands up in the air when he throws it. Just you never know when just a slight deflection will turn into a big play for you or stop a third down. I mean, that's something you always want your defensive tackles to. These guys are big, strong men, but if they are held in check by the other big, strong men on the other side, you can still affect the play if you watch the quarterback and you're aware and you do the little things. And I think that we've seen that. Through the years, Ohio State's been pretty good at deflecting passes and making plays like that. But sometimes, young guys just want to pin their ears back and go get the quarterback. And I think you just have to play it smart. You have to know when you're stalemated and just adjust your tactics accordingly.
Precisely. I think Coach Johnson, has, that was something that we talked about Haskell Garrett, something that he did at Michigan State, the idea of being able to have his hand up, deflect the pass. It resulted in an unlikely interception for a touchdown, but those kind of things, like you said, you're not necessarily going to be able to sack the quarterback, but anything you can do to impact his throwing lanes, get him to throw sooner than he wants. That's certainly what would be welcomed against Clemson.
Indeed. Taking a look at this defense for Clemson, Chip, it's so hard to know who to key on because you got Brent Venables is a guy who likes to mix things up and throw everything he can think of at you. And so you look at their sacks this year, Chip, and you've got 7 guys who have at least 3 sacks. Nobody has more than 4. And you have you take that further. 9 guys have 2.5 to 4 sacks. So it's not one guy doing everything. It's a little bit of Trenton Simpson, a linebacker. It's a little bit of Miles Murphy. It's a little bit of Jake Venables. It's a little bit of Levante Bentley. It's everyone. It's kind of and the good thing about this is that Ohio State game planned for this defense last year, so they kind of know how this is going to go. They kind of know what Brent Venables likes to do. So I think in this case, Brent Venables should just play base defense the whole game. I think that's the smart play here.
Sure. I'm sure Coach Venables, I'm sure he's content just playing that base defense. I think this situation, unlike last year, and I'm not trying to minimize, again, any of the defensive players that you just rattled off. Unlike last year, Justin Fields, I mean, the issue that Ohio State has with Justin Fields this year is, well, how healthy is that thumb? I mean, that's kind of a concern, right? Like he had that sprained thumb. Is it fully healed? We don't really know. But unlike last year, Justin Fields, he was nursing that injury that he had sustained in the Michigan game. He wasn't 100%, with that high ankle, like the knee injury that he had that kind of limited his mobility. I'm thinking that this is kind of goes back to what I said earlier. I think, the rollouts, the waggles, when he drops back, if pressure is coming, to not be afraid to I'm not saying necessarily take off every time, but start to move up in the pocket. If you can get positive yardage, get it. If you think that you can hit a check down like Trey Sermon or one of the tight ends, take that. I think that will impact Brent Venables from being able to be, truly exotic with a lot of the blitzes and stunts, because after a while, if Justin Fields is able to capitalize on making somebody miss, I think that will impact Clemson's defensive game plan.
Yeah, and it might just be something simple, a simple adjustment like asking Justin to read short to long on the routes rather than read long to short. That way you're still, even if you don't have a lot of time, you're still going through your first couple, reads, and you still get your check down, but you can hit the underneath stuff and kind of stay ahead of the chains and move the ball that way. Not everything has to be a bomb. It's okay to take some shots, especially if you're having a lot of success running the ball, because then you can run a play action and try to hit something deep. But they have to be smart about how they go after it and how they attack this Clemson defense. They're pretty good group, and probably the best that Ohio State has seen this year. So the good thing is we only have to wait a couple days and we'll see how it all plays out.
Yeah, I say let's get our predictions going here.
All right, so we're going to do like we always do, and we don't obviously know who all is going to be playing. One thing I will say, before we get on our predictions, Chip, is that you and I kind of do know how Justin Fields is feeling. We may not have 100%, straight from the horse's mouth confirmation, but we kind of have an idea because you and I, Chip, are Buckeye Scoop insiders. And anybody that has, subscribed to the Buckeye Scoop as an insider, they can go on our Ask the Insiders board, and they can get an update from practice.
Precisely. If Santa did not bring you a Buckeye Scoop membership, treat yourself. Going into, making a New Year's resolution to become an insider on Buckeye Scoop, as Michael and I are, it's certainly well worth the investment. And can't say enough good things about the practice reports, any of the information that we get from the Buckeye Scoop, any of the podcasts that are readily available for you to listen to besides ours.
All right, Chip, it is time. I'm going to start with picks to click, and you're going to start on defense. Who do you got? Who's your pick to click defensively against Clemson?
Defensively, I apologize if I steal your guy. I'm going with Pete Werner. I think Pete Werner, is going to be crucial in the Travis Etienne slowdown, the hopeful slowdown, if you will. I think, the possibility of applying pressure, just being effective in the running game, all of those kind of things. I'm going with Pete Werner.
I'm going to go completely off the board. And this might be a little bit of a surprise. And we'll see. We'll see what you think of this. But I think with some of the DBs that were out in the last game, some of the guys that have had to step in, that have had a couple weeks now on the practice field, and I think they're going to play more, and I think they're going to need to play more because I think they're going to have to rotate some guys in. I'm going to go with a very unconventional pick to click on defense, and I'm going to say Lathan Ransom.
I like Lathan Ransom. That's a really good selection because Lathan Ransom is one of those stars of the recruiting class who has been a lot of fanfare, and the coaches, I think, are excited to see what he can bring, and it wouldn't be surprising to see number 12 out there more frequently than probably a lot of the fans had anticipated.
Yeah, so it may backfire on me, and he might not even play much, but I'm going to go with it because, several of these weeks, my guy either didn't even play or was kind of invisible. So I'm going to try something. I'm going to shake it up a little bit and go Lathan Ransom. I'm going to go a little bit more conventional on the offensive side, and I'm ride the hot hand and take Trey Sermon as my offensive pick to click. Who do you have?
I'm going to go, again, this is kind of, I don't want to say swinging for the fences, but, let's just say that I think we're going to see the long-awaited year of the tight end with Jeremy Ruckert having a big game as that outlet. I hope this is not his last game as a Buckeye, but it wouldn't be surprising. He's, kind of that baby Gronk label that he's been associated with. Let's see Jeremy Ruckert having a big game against Clemson.
All right, from your lips to God's ears, Chip. That would be phenomenal. We would love to see a big game out of Jeremy Ruckert, or really any tight end at Ohio State at this point, because we like the tight ends. We just don't see them enough. It's they do a lot of really cool, great things in the blocking game, but I'd love to see them get more of the glory. And you could be right. This could be a game where we see that. All right, our picks to click are in. They're registered. We've sent them to the Library of Congress. And now it's time for your score prediction, Chip. Ohio State, Clemson. Who do you got? What's your final score?
I think this is going to be a game for the ages. I think Ohio State has to withstand some of that initial onslaught that I've been discussing, in terms of like with the Clemson offense, but get them frustrated. And I see Ohio State prevailing late 38-35.
That is amazing, and I'll tell you why in a minute that you picked this score. I like it. It's bold. It could work. I mean, Ohio State's going to need to score some points to win this game. Chip, I just think this is the wrong year for this matchup. It's like I said, this Ohio State team's played 6 games. They've been robbed of 3 by COVID. I think those 3 were crucial in the development of the team as a whole. We've seen some parts of the team have gelled, other parts have not yet gelled. Can they have done it in the time between the Big Ten Championship and January 1st? I don't know. And as a result, because Clemson has had a more or less a normal year, I'm going to pick 38-34 Clemson, and I had not joking, had written that score down before you gave me yours, and it's almost a mirror image. It's almost a flipped mirror image.
Yeah.
And I hope I'm wrong. I hope the Buckeyes prove me wrong. In fact, Ryan Day, why don't you go ahead and put that up on the bulletin board for more material?
There you go. Do what we can to help.
Yeah, I don't remember. The last time I didn't pick Ohio State in a game, Chip, I think was 2 Michigan games ago, and I was wrong, and I was quite fine with that.
That's okay. You'd be wrong again.
Yeah, it'd be great. I would love to be wrong. I would love to be proven wrong in this one. It's just if Ohio State had played a full schedule, I don't know that my pick would be what it is. Because you never really can underestimate the revenge factor. But every team is different. Even if teams that come back loaded are different than the year before. I mean, you remember Ohio State wins national championship. They got a lot of guys coming back. You figure they're going to be back in the national championship game here pretty soon. And it didn't happen. And that's been a couple of times that's happened. So every team is different. You got different motivations. You got different injury issues and different, guys leaving for the pros and that kind of thing. There's all kinds of different things that go into every season, a team being different. And I just see some deficiencies on the defensive side of the ball that I think are tailor-made for Clemson to exploit. So, like I said, I hope I'm wrong. Hopefully Ohio State will play defense like it did in the second half against Northwestern, with the first drive of the second half accepted, the exception. I'd like to see that. I'd love it if they've been rope-a-doping all year and disguising stuff and not playing some of the things that they plan on playing. But I mean, I don't know how does that work in reality? Holding plays back doesn't seem to make any sense, because then you don't have any sense of whether or not they're going to work in a game. So I think that's one of those. It just seems to be one of those fake things. We're holding things back for Michigan. We're holding things back for the bowl game. I don't think you can do that in this day and age. You might have been able to do it when the scholarships were not equal, but I don't think you can do it nowadays, and I don't expect it. But like I said, I hate picking against Ohio State, but I would love to be wrong.
Well, we shall see.
Indeed, we shall. Of course, the first game will be Bama and Notre Dame in the Texas Rose Bowl, the Yellow Rose of Texas Bowl. I don't know, something like that. It just doesn't seem like the Rose Bowl. And Sugar Bowl is the late game. The things Ohio State has going for it. Pretty good record in the Sugar Bowl lately. Same uniforms they wore when they beat Bama. So, they're pulling out all the good luck charms, I guess.
Absolutely. Nothing wrong with that. Psychologically, like I said, I think that the edge is clearly with Ohio State. I guess if I'm Justin Fields, this is an opportunity to kind of prove a lot of the naysayers and skeptics wrong. I think this is kind of, to not try to, let's just say, try to do everything, all by himself, like to rely on a lot of that talent that's on the roster. I think it's within his grasp to rewrite the script. And that's kind of, I'm anticipating a better game plan offensively than we've seen Justin Fields, in the bigger games. And again, I just hope that you're wrong, as the Ohio State fan base will.
Yep.
It was not an easy decision. It was
fair,
based on a lot of those coaching strategy just points that I raised, that I think Ohio State can do it. They could possibly do all of them and still lose. It's entirely, it's a good team they're going up against, but I certainly think that they have it within their grasp to pull off the upset against a team that is not as good as they were last year.
Do you know if Ryan Day is going to have Urban Meyer come in and give a speech this week?
Not that I'm aware of, but hey, if that will help, I would not be against it.
I mean, I can't think of a better big game motivator type than Urban Meyer. I mean, you'd have to look pretty hard to find one. So, pull out all the stops, have him come in and fire him up, give a big speech. But it will be fun to watch. It's I think Tom Orr said this best this week on Buckeye Weekly, that whether the Buckeyes win or lose, just enjoy the fact that they're here in the college football playoff. This is what we all wanted. It's been a weird year. We didn't think a couple of months ago there would even be a season, and here they are. They are the champions of the conference once again. And it's going to be your last opportunity to see some of these players on the field wearing scarlet and gray. So enjoy it while it's here, because it's going to be gone soon.
Precisely. It's a long time until... we can't even say spring football. So, yeah, enjoy the moment.
And if they win, then we all get to celebrate and be nervous again next week.
Yeah. that is for certain.
All right, Chip. Anything else we need to discuss? Oh, there is one thing we didn't discuss, is that we've seen pictures of Chris Olave at practice this week.
Which, again, is an optimistic thing. But, again, I hope that Justin Fields does not become overly reliant, as he seemed to be missing him in the Big Ten championship game against Northwestern. Let's hope that he realizes he needs to rely on everyone within the offense, not just his wide receivers.
Sure. I'm all for that, but I'm also all for Chris Olave catching long touchdowns. That's also a favorite of mine.
Certainly.
and again, we don't know how much that was a trickle-down effect of missing one guy makes you rely on another guy, and then you got to rely on a third guy, and then the things that the third receiver were doing are now done by the fourth receiver. Sometimes that makes a little bit of a difference. I can remember a game against Florida when we didn't have a Ted Ginn out there, and they were kind of then your best corner is not going against Ted Ginn. He's going against the next guy. And everybody, even good receivers, once they get up against bigger competition, things don't work as well. So we'll see how it goes. I'm excited. It means probably Chris Olave, if he's practicing with the team, can play, which means they have probably shortened that 21-day limit.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll see who else was missing from the Big Ten championship gets in. Of course, Ohio State's Jackson Smith and Jigba was another guy missing from the receiver core last game, and his presence is kind of important. He's the guy on out of the wideouts that had the most catches, I think, outside of Olave and Garrett Wilson. So again, a little bit of a trickle down. If that guy's not there, you need the next guy, and then the next guy, and then the next guy. So we will come back next week, Chip. You and I will see who did better on our picks to click, who did better on our score prediction. We'll talk about the game, and if there's another game, we'll talk about that one. How about that?
Sounds good. Looking forward to it.
All right, I guess there is not much left for us to do except to say, if you haven't subscribed to Buckeye Scoop, it's a good idea. There's all kinds of nuggets in the Ask the Insiders board. They happen at least a couple of times a week where you get a little peek behind the curtain. And we're not going to spoil any of that stuff on our show, but it's a good place to go and get some insider information. Also, check out all of our sister shows on the Buckeye Scoop Radio Network, Buckeye Weekly. Of course, there's the Sloopcast. There's Gives in the Bank. Scoop World Order. There's Morning Scoop. Just shows. There's a show for everyone. There's probably 2 or 3 shows for everyone at this point, Chip.
Easily.
Chip, where can they find you on the internet?
They can find me on Twitter at Chip Minnich. My last name is spelled Minnich. And I'm a contributor to Athlon Sports, usually writing state football. I had an article about 5 reasons why Ohio State will win the college football playoff.
Nice. All right. I am at Mike36Fan on Twitter. So hit us up on Twitter if you have a question you want answered on the show. We'll be happy to answer. Also, you can find me on BuckeyeScoop.com as the grumpy old Buckeye. And I had plenty to be grumpy about after the Northwestern game. Hopefully, I won't have a very long column on Sunday, because that means good things happen on Saturday.
I agree.
All right, that'll do it. Only thing left for us to do for the last time in 2020, Chip. Oh, doesn't that feel good to say that? Is to say, go Bucks.
Go Bucks.